Somewhere between 30 and 40 trillion cells in your body are dividing, replacing old tissue, repairing damage, maintaining your organs. That's not a metaphor. That's literally happening inside you as you watch this video. Every time a cell divides, there is a small but real probability of a copying error, a mutation. In most cases, your immune system catches it, flags the damaged cell, and destroys it through a process called apoptosis, which is essentially programmed cell suicide. Your body is extraordinarily good at this. But here's where it breaks down. This entire immune surveillance system, the process of identifying abnormal cells and triggering their self-destruction, is not running on autopilot. It is being actively directed by the bacteria living in the inner lining of your gut, specifically a bacterium called Akkermansia mucinifila. Akkermansia lives in the mucus layer of your intestinal wall. Think of it as your gut's internal security director. When Akkermansia is abundant, it trains and activates the immune cells that patrol your body for early cancer signals. It produces metabolites that directly trigger apoptosis, that self-destruct mechanism, in cells showing signs of malignant transformation. But here's the alarming part. A 2022 analysis from University College London, measuring gut microbiome samples from over 4,000 adults across 9 countries, found that adults eating a standard Western diet had Akkermansia levels 73% lower than adults eating a traditional whole food diet. 73% lower, not slightly lower, not marginally reduced, nearly wiped out. And it's getting worse, not better. Antibiotic prescriptions have tripled in the past 20 years. Processed food consumption is at an all-time high. Ultra-processed diets, the ones centered on refined carbohydrates, added sugars, and industrial seed oils, actively starve Akkermansia. This bacterium feeds on specific plant compounds that are almost entirely absent from the modern Western diet. We have been systematically depleting the one bacterium that stands between us and unchecked cancer cell growth, and almost nobody is talking about it. Think of your gut microbiome like a symphony orchestra. A full orchestra has dozens of instruments: brass, strings, woodwinds, percussion. Each section plays a distinct role. Some instruments carry the melody, others provide the harmonic foundation, others mark the tempo. When every section is present and performing at full capacity, the result is something extraordinary, a coordinated, powerful output that none of the individual instruments could produce alone. Now imagine an orchestra where the first chair violinist, the one who leads the strings section, the one who sets the tone for half the ensemble, is missing. The concert continues. You still hear music, but something is fundamentally off. The harmonic structure is weakened. The melody falters in the critical passages. The overall performance is a shadow of what it should be. That is exactly what happens when Akkermansia levels collapse in your gut. Akkermansia is not just one voice among many. It is the lead instrument in your immune orchestra. It produces a compound called butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that directly fuels the intestinal cells maintaining your gut barrier and signals to immune cells throughout your body. Without adequate Akkermansia, the butyrate signal weakens. The immune cells that should be patrolling for early cancer activity become less responsive. The entire defense system loses its conductor. The researchers took a critical next step. They transplanted gut bacteria from high Akkermansia patients into patients who had not responded to immunotherapy. In a substantial portion of those previously non-responding patients, the treatment began working. Transplanting gut bacteria turned treatment failures into treatment successes. This wasn't a change in medication, not a higher dose, not a new protocol. The single variable was the presence of one gut bacterium. When butyrate, the key compound produced by Akkermansia, was introduced at concentrations consistent with a high Akkermansia gut environment. The result, cancer cell apoptosis, programmed self-destruction, increased by 58%. Not in healthy cells, in cancer cells specifically, the butyrate selectively activated a protein pathway called the HDAC inhibition pathway, which essentially turns the cancer cell's own self-destruct mechanism back on. Healthy cells were unaffected. This is the extraordinary elegance of this system. The bacterium produces a compound that tells cancer cells to die while leaving healthy cells completely alone. Study 3. Patients with higher Akkermansia abundance had a 46% longer median progression-free survival period compared to patients with low Akkermansia. Their tumors grew more slowly. Their bodies held the disease at bay for longer. When Akkermansia is well fed, it ferments dietary fiber and produces butyrate. Butyrate travels through your gut lining into your bloodstream and reaches cells throughout your body. In healthy cells, butyrate supports normal gene expression, but in cells with malignant characteristics, cells with damaged DNA or abnormal growth signaling, butyrate activates the HDAC inhibition pathway, which in plain language means it reactivates the genes that tell a damaged cell to die. Cancer cells don't want to die. They've essentially turned off the self-destruct signal. That's part of what makes them cancerous. Butyrate turns it back on. This is not speculation. HDAC inhibitors are an approved class of cancer drugs. The bacteria in your gut produce them for free every day, provided you feed them correctly. Pathway 2, T cell and NK cell activation via gut immune signaling. The second pathway is even more important for long-term prevention, in my view. About 70% of your immune system physically lives in and around the walls of your gut. The intestinal lining is not just a digestive organ. It's the primary training ground for your immune cells, particularly the T cells and natural killer cells responsible for identifying and eliminating early-stage cancer. Akkermansia is in direct conversation with these immune cells. It produces molecules that bind to receptors on intestinal immune cells and essentially activate them, increase their number, sharpen their ability to recognize abnormal cells, and extend their activity throughout the body. When Akkermansia is abundant, your T cell population is more alert, more responsive, and more capable of catching cancer early. When Akkermansia is depleted, these immune cells become sluggish. They miss things they shouldn't miss. By the time a tumor becomes detectable, the immune system has already been failing its surveillance duty for years. Pathway 3, epithelial barrier integrity, closing the gateway. There's a third mechanism that most people have never heard of, and I think it may be the most underappreciated of all. Cancer doesn't just need to form, it needs to spread. And spreading, what oncologists call metastasis, requires cancer cells to get from their origin point into your bloodstream or lymphatic system. Here's how that happens. When your gut lining is compromised, when the tight junction proteins that seal the spaces between intestinal cells start to break down, a condition called intestinal permeability develops. Fragments of bacteria, inflammatory compounds, and in some cases cancer precursor cells can migrate through a leaky gut lining into systemic circulation. Akkermansia directly protects the integrity of those tight junction proteins. It produces a surface protein called AMIC 1100 that binds to gut lining receptors and reinforces the seal. Studies from the University of Leuven in Belgium showed that adequate Akkermansia colonization was associated with a 52% improvement in gut barrier integrity markers compared to Akkermansia-depleted subjects. A strong gut lining is not just a digestive benefit, it is a physical barrier against cancer spread. Now that you understand the three mechanisms, the question is, what can you actually do about it? Here is the precise protocol I recommend based on the clinical research. Specific foods, exact amounts, preparation methods that preserve the active compounds. Pomegranate, 1 cup of seeds, arils, or 8 Oz pure pomegranate juice, daily curious. Pomegranate contains compounds called L-gitannins. Your gut bacteria convert L-gitannins into a metabolite called urolithin A, which directly feeds and multiplies Akkermansia mucinifila. A clinical study from the Institute of Food Research found that regular pomegranate consumption increased Akkermansia colonization by up to 37% within 3 weeks. Eat the whole fruit with seeds, or drink cold-pressed juice with no added sugar. Pasteurized pomegranate drinks from concentrate have significantly reduced L-gitannin content. If you use juice, look for 100% pomegranate with nothing added. Drink it in the morning. L-gitannins are absorbed best on an empty or semi-empty stomach. Thoughtful, oats. 1 cup cooked rolled oats or steel-cut oats, 5 days per week. Oats contain a specific type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan that Akkermansia has a particular affinity for. Beta-glucan is also one of the few dietary compounds that has been shown to directly stimulate the proliferation of Akkermansia in stool sample studies. Not just maintain it, but actively increase it. Cook them on the stovetop with water. Avoid instant oats. The processing reduces the beta-glucan density. Do not add dairy milk, as the proteins can interfere with the bioavailability of polyphenols if you're pairing oats with other protective foods. Use water, oat milk, or almond milk. Add ground flaxseed and berries on top for compounding effect. Walnuts, 30 grams, roughly 1 small handful. Daily walnuts are one of the richest whole food sources of L-glutathione, the same precursor compounds found in pomegranate. They also provide omega-3 alpha-linolenic acid, which supports the integrity of the gut lining that akkermansia depends on. A controlled trial from the University of Illinois tracked gut microbiome changes in healthy adults who ate 43 grams of walnuts daily for 8 weeks. The walnut group showed significant increases in akkermansia and roseburia, both beauty rate-producing strains, compared to the control group. Eat them raw, not roasted in industrial seed oils. A handful with breakfast or as an afternoon snack. The fat content slows absorption and keeps akkermansia feeding compounds in the gut longer. Cranberries, 1-2 cup fresh or frozen, unsweetened, or 2 tablespoons unsweetened dried cranberries 4 to 5 times per week. Cranberries are one of the few foods with documented direct prebiotic activity specifically on akkermansia, meaning they don't just feed bacteria generally. Researchers have observed them selectively promoting akkermansia growth. The active compounds are type A proanthocyanidins, a specific class of polyphenols found in very few foods outside of cranberries. Do not use sweetened dried cranberries. The added sugar negates the benefit and actively feeds harmful bacterial strains that compete with akkermansia. Use fresh, frozen, or unsweetened. Add to oatmeal, smoothies, or eat alongside walnuts. Dried chili peppers or cayenne, 1 or 4 to 1.2 teaspoon in cooking, daily or near daily. This one surprises most people. Dried chili peppers, particularly cayenne, contain capsaicin, which acts as a selective prebiotic for akkermansia. Research from the Institut Pasteur in France showed that capsaicin stimulated akkermansia growth in the mucosal layer, while simultaneously inhibiting the growth of inflammatory bacterial strains. You don't need extreme amounts. A 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne in cooking, soups, stews, scrambled eggs, roasted vegetables is enough to produce a measurable effect over time. Fresh chili works as well. The key is consistency. Daily exposure matters more than large occasional doses. Cooked leeks or onions, 1 to 2 cup cooked, 4 times per week. Leeks and onions are among the best dietary sources of inulin, a long-chain prebiotic fiber that is fermented in the lower gut by akkermansia and other beneficial strains. Inulin produces butyrate as a fermentation byproduct, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Inulin feeds akkermansia, akkermansia produces butyrate. Butyrate signals immune cells. Immune cells target cancer. Cooking leeks and onions actually improves inulin bioavailability compared to raw. So don't skip the cooking step. Sauté them in olive oil, add them to soups, or roast them as a side. Garlic provides the same class of compound. If you eat one of these in some form most days, your akkermansia colonization will reflect it within weeks. Green tea, 2 to 3 cups daily, brewed from loose leaf or whole leaf bags. Green tea's cancer protective properties are extensively documented, but the mechanism most relevant here is its EGCG content, a catechin that has a dual role, directly triggering apoptosis in early-stage cancer cells through MAPK pathway activation and simultaneously supporting the gut mucosal environment that akkermansia inhabits. 2 to 3 cups daily provides approximately 200 to 300 mg of EGCG, which is the range used in the most well-powered intervention studies. Brew at around 160, 175 degrees Celsius. Boiling water degrades catechins by up to 30%. Let it steep for 3 minutes. Critical warning, do not add dairy milk. The casein proteins in cow's milk bind directly to catechins and reduce their bioavailability by up to 80%. Use your tea plain or with lemon. Vitamin C actually enhances catechin absorption. Pro tips from 2 decades of clinical practice. Tip 1, stack your L-glutathione foods. Pomegranate and walnuts both provide L-glutannins. Eaten together or within the same meal, they produce a compounding effect on akkermansia that is greater than either food alone. This isn't marketing language. Researchers at the University of California, Davis showed that combining 2 L-glutathione sources increased urolithin A conversion by 45% compared to equivalent doses of each food given separately. This is because different L-glutathione structures interact with different bacterial pathways in sequence. Make it a habit. Add crushed walnuts to your morning pomegranate or mix cranberries and walnuts as a daily snack. Tip 2, protect your akkermansia during and after antibiotic treatment. Antibiotics are sometimes medically necessary, but a single course of broad-spectrum antibiotics can reduce Akkermansia colonization by over 90%. And in some patients, levels do not recover to baseline for 6 months to a year without intentional dietary rebuilding. If you need antibiotics, begin the Akkermansia protocol immediately after your final dose. Don't wait. Every day of delay is a day that inflammatory bacterial strains are repopulating faster than your protective strains. This is not about avoiding necessary treatment, it's about recovering strategically after it. Tip 3. Eat your last meal at least 3 hours before bed. Akkermansia is most active during fasting windows. When your gut is not actively processing food, Akkermansia migrates deeper into the mucus layer and reinforces the epithelial barrier. Eating late, particularly heavy, processed meals, disrupts this repair window. The patients I see with the strongest gut microbiome profiles almost universally eat dinner early and maintain a natural overnight fast of at least 12 hours. This costs nothing. It requires only a shift in timing, not a change in what you eat. Tip 4. Ditch the antibacterial mouthwash before meals with nitrate-rich vegetables. This one is specific but important. If you eat leafy greens, beets, or other nitrate-rich vegetables, your oral bacteria play a critical role in converting those nitrates into nitric oxide, a compound that supports circulation and gut lining health. Antibacterial mouthwash used right before eating those vegetables eliminates the oral bacteria needed for that conversion. Use mouthwash at night after your last meal, not before the first. The mistakes that wipe out everything you're building. Mistake 1. Eating processed meats and thinking you're compensating with supplements. Processed meats, bacon, deli meats, hot dogs, certain sausages, have been classified by the World Health Organization as Group 1 carcinogens. That is the same classification as cigarette smoke. One of the key mechanisms is their direct toxicity to Akkermansia and other protective gut bacteria. The sodium nitrite used in preservation disrupts the mucosal environment Akkermansia depends on. I see patients who take 12 different supplements and then eat a deli sandwich for lunch 3 days a week. The supplements cannot counteract that damage. The villain and the hero cannot cancel each other out in real time. You have to remove the thing that is actively destroying what you're trying to build. Mistake 2. Assuming a probiotic supplement replaces dietary Akkermansia building. You can now buy Akkermansia supplements. They exist. They have their place, particularly for people recovering from antibiotic-related microbiome depletion. But here is what supplement capsules cannot replicate: the ecosystem. Akkermansia does not live in isolation. It depends on a prebiotic-rich environment, the fiber compounds from pomegranate, oats, leeks, and cranberries, to establish, multiply, and maintain its mucus layer niche. You can swallow Akkermansia in capsule form, but without the dietary conditions that allow it to colonize, it passes through. The whole food approach builds the habitat. The supplement just adds more organisms into an environment that may or may not support them. Whole food protocol first. Supplements as a bridge or booster, not a replacement. Mistake 3. Doing this for 2 weeks and stopping. The research on microbiome rebuilding is consistent on one point. The gains are real, but they require continuity. A study from the Wellcome Sanger Institute tracked microbiome composition in subjects who adopted a high prebiotic diet for 4 weeks, then stopped. Within 3 weeks of reverting to their prior diet, Akkermansia levels had returned to near baseline. The gains erased almost completely. This is not a 2-week protocol. It is not a 30-day challenge. The human microbiome responds to the diet you feed it consistently. Treat this as a permanent upgrade to how you eat, not a temporary intervention. You have more power. Hear than you've been told. Look, a cancer diagnosis does not mean your story is already written, and the absence of a diagnosis does not mean prevention is someone else's job. The patients I've watched navigate this disease with the best outcomes, the ones who defy the prognosis, the ones who respond to treatment when they weren't expected to, the ones who stay cancer-free for decades, are not genetically exceptional. They are not lucky in any way medicine can measure. They share something else entirely. They treated their internal environment as seriously as they treated their external symptoms. They understood that what they ate every day was either feeding the bacteria that protect them or starving it. They made that a non-negotiable. You are not a passive recipient of your genetic fate. Your gut microbiome is a living system that responds to your choices within days. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most significant insights in modern oncology, and it puts meaningful power directly in your hands. Cancer will affect 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. The science on gut health and cancer protection is real. It's rigorous. Check out my next video where I break down the 5 most powerful anti-angiogenic foods that starve tumor growth by cutting off blood supply. The science there is equally extraordinary. I'll see you in the next one. Dr. Liana out.